Sorry. It's Jake. We are live. Welcome to the show. My name is Jake. This is the All Worldly channel live. We are talking about crazy witness stuff. And thank you so much for joining us. No intro. We're just simplified edition, All Worldly Live simplified edition, because we have a lot to talk about today. If you're new to the live streams, these are usually more like ephemeral. I record them, have a fun time hanging out with chat, and then they go on Twitch, and sometimes I'll upload highlight reels to the channel. But this one, I want to just let the whole thing stay on the channel. So if you're new to this is obviously a less structured and succinct kind of video than my normal like video essay style thing. So if you're not into that, that's okay, and you don't have to tell me. You don't have to hurt my feelings in the comments and tell me that you don't like the live streams. I know it already, and I already hate myself just enough for the both of us. So thank you for joining us. This is super exciting, and also I stream I say this, and I haven't actually stuck to the schedule that I wanted to do in my head, but Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, I'll put information in the description. No preamble. We're going to get into it because on Jehovah's Witnesses' official website, jw.org, they released a morning worship program, as they are wont to do. But this one is particularly cringy and, in my opinion, and the opinion of the ex-JW community would seem, rather desperate. I don't know if we've ever seen the governing body appear quite as desperate, maybe not since the David's Plain apostasy talk. So I think it's going to be a really fun watch. There'll be a lot to talk about. We're going to go through it, and we'll do that together as a family. I'm going to try and keep it PG. Usually the stream's a little bit more freewheeling. I'll drop a bomb of the F variety. I'll use non-biblical swear words even sometimes, but not today. This is clean. Invite your family to your large radio that takes up an entire wall in your house. Think of this as a fireside chat, and a chat with the live chat. So we got people chiming in. Please do like the video and comment after the live stream is done too. That will help engagement. It'll help people see it. And I think this is one that will help people, see some of the conflict that's going on in the organization right now. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, I'm going to take a drink of water. Hey, I know. Trying to embrace criticisms, trying to curate my content a little bit more carefully. No, I kind of have made a little pledge to myself, I'm not going to curse on the channel anymore unless it's super necessary or something, or if I do, I'll bleep it. And then I haven't really uploaded anything since I made that vow to myself. So anyway, that's going to be the goal. And one of the other criticisms I get is that I ramble on for too long at the beginning of a stream. So I will get into it, and it'll take me a little bit, but I'll add chapters to this thing as well if you are watching this after it originally aired. And people are already asking good questions. How are we supposed to not use the term FBAG 9000 when we see the morning worship? Good question. We'll see can I stick to my own pledge of allegiance to myself. I don't know what kind of vibe we're going for, but some are saying that I look dapper. Compliments. We love to see it. There's holiness. People can feel the holiness emanating from the stream. And thanks so much to everyone for hanging out with us. This video is a morning worship on jw.org. And you know what? I downloaded the video, so I didn't even think to tell you the title of it, but you probably want to know that. It is, as of this recording, the most recent morning worship on jw.org. But if you want to follow along at home, or, send this video or reference this video when maybe refuting something to your witness friends and family, I want to give you the information on what this thing is actually called. Okay, so I'll tell you what I'll do. I will drop a link to this in the chat as well, just in case anyone's curious. But this is entitled Jeffrey W. Jackson, Keep the Belt of Truth Tight. Jeffrey Jackson, keeping it tight. As always, curse you, my little Pimo. But it's true. So that is the video in question that we're going to be talking about. And we have a lot of people watching. So now I'm nervous and I'm going to ramble and go on tangents even more. It's your fault if this sucks. That seems like a fair criticism. That's something healthy people do, right? It's just if something goes bad, it's definitely everybody else's fault. Okay, so I do want to set the table a little bit for this. So yes, sorry, preamble, but this is relevant preamble. One of the things that we've been talking about on the channel and specifically the streams that we've been doing like for the last few weeks. And if you want to watch another like full stream that I did, which sounds gross, but remember this is PG, so no jokes about full streams. There was a Bethel leak of sorts, a comment on the XJW Reddit that basically was from an insider within Warwick, within World Headquarters, who talked about the vibe at Bethel kind of post-COVID. You know, we're not actually post-COVID, but obviously we're all just kind of treating it like we are, including the governing body and Watchtower. So he talked about the general vibe. And one of the things that this leaker mentioned was that there's a real paranoia within the Watchtower leadership right now about the negative press that they're receiving, about leaks, about apostasy. And he listed some examples of that. At the same time, we are recording this. A new documentary just dropped on Netflix called Keep Sweet, which is really, really good. Me and my cat started watching that this weekend, and it's really fantastic. And it's really like making waves on the internet. And there's no way that some witnesses aren't going to watch it because it's, you know, just a documentary. But there's also no way that they're not going to see some correlations between the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints and Jehovah's Witnesses. They use a lot of the same language. They use a lot of the same rhetorical manipulation devices. So that's kind of in the ether. And then much more specifically to Watchtower, the Telegraph, the UK publication, published like a huge cover story on sex abuse cover-ups within the organization and is launching a podcast called Call Bethel. And it is specifically about the organization's failure to protect children within the organization. And it's going to be like a 5-part podcast series that's probably going to be pretty devastating. And that's really notable, I think. Watchtower has somehow managed to avoid a going clear. You know, that was Scientology was already a toxic brand and had been made fun of before that came out. But that combination of the book and that documentary coming out on HBO, which was so popular that everybody was talking about it, really was kind of the nail in the coffin and also the start of such an overwhelming avalanche of negative press. You know, I think it was around that time that Leah Remini launched her show, Scientology in the Aftermath. And that, of course, led to an episode about Jehovah's Witnesses. And they've mostly avoided that. That Australian Four Corners special that aired has over 5 million views. So, you know, by this time next year, there may be more people that have seen that than there are Jehovah's Witnesses total. So there is a lot of bad press. And we've talked about this. Their Watchtower is going out and doing more PR, sort of, in their weird Watchtower way. But they're a little paranoid. And there's also, I think, something that we all kind of intellectually know that this Bethel leaker really articulated, which was the sense of like malaise in the branch. And I think, just hearing reports from PMOs and stuff in Bethel at large. I'm sorry, not in Bethel at large, but in the organization at large. Like the most appropriate term that is not my term, but that I've seen on the XJW Reddit that I think really describes most of the rank and file is like PMA, physically in, mentally apathetic. And not to say, like, I think sometimes people have these scenarios in their head where there's all of these secret PMOs that just, if they all just stood up and left. I don't think that's necessarily the case, although I'm sure there are many out there that just haven't left yet. I think what's really happened, though, especially with the pandemic, where there's just kind of like a global sense of malaise and depression, that's really happening within the organization. The Kingdom Halls are very empty right now. We're seeing constant reports of that. And we also, like, I have it on good authority. Like we've even seen reports of some PMO elders who have reported that like circuit overseers are mentioning the increase in men stepping down from appointed like elder and ministerial servant positions. And they're concerned about apostasy. This is something that's coming up in circuit overseer visits with the elders. They are acknowledging the effective activism work, the important activism work of apostates. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and say hi to one of our special guests today, which is Bo. Hey, buddy. Hi. You're famous, man. You're going to sniff the purple light. You can see my high-tech setup where I have a purple light bulb on a stick. Add a little bit of dimension to the image there. So anyway, this I think is all important context because this talk, I think, really speaks to this. There's a sense of desperation about Jeffrey Jackson, and he really is speaking to that keep the love you had at first, or like rekindle that love you had at first. That phrase that we hear a lot as witnesses, or that we heard a lot depending on where you're at in your journey. So I want to catch up with chat just a little bit and just see, there we go. That's the thing. And here's the other thing with this is that the there's a huge window. Well, it's not huge actually. It's just very like prominent, and I don't know. It really messes up the lighting. So many comments. I legitimately can't keep up with it. So if I don't acknowledge your comment, it's because you're just so prolifically awesome that I can't even keep up with what's happening. Ooh. Evelyn says be as gullible as you were at first. That kind of gets to the heart of the issue. All right, well, let's get into this, and we're just going to kind of start going through it, and we'll pause and comment as we go.
This morning, we're going to discuss the thought of keeping the belt of truth tight around our waists.
Right.
Now, why is that so important? Well, we see in the world today, there's just no end to the misinformation.
Quick clarification, by the way, good question by LOH in the comments. We have so many abbreviations in the XJW community. We've carried that over from the organization. R/F means rank and file. Just sort of like your average publisher. Kind of a old-fashioned word in a way, but I don't know, it's caught on. So that, if you see that kind of on the boards or on Twitter or in the live chat right now, that's what people are talking about, rank and file witnesses.
Lies, the falsehoods that are being spread.
I'm actually going to rewind this so we make sure we get the full.
Well, we see in the world today, there's just no end to the misinformation, the lies, the falsehoods that are being spread. But in
the misinformation, the lies, and the falsehoods that are being spread. So, oh my God, this sounds like a real problem. There's so many lies going on about Jehovah's Witnesses. So surely this is going to be a talk where he gets into this and he explains to us what these lies are. He clarifies our understanding, puts to bed these wild accusations. No, this is not what he goes on to do.
In addition to that, as Jehovah's people, we face all sorts of verbal attacks, don't we? People accusing us of horrific things. And this can be very discouraging.
Things, just horrific things, verbal attacks by people saying things that are terrible. What are these things? I don't know. And I think, this is kind of one of the things that they have an issue with. And like, if you're a witness who's just kind of like totally in, don't have any questions, you're just going to hear this and think, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. There probably are a lot of things. But if you're somebody who's starting to get curious, like, boy, this is something they sure talk about a lot, and they never tell us what the things are. That's how I was. I know that's how a lot of people are. And they obviously, good comment from 18C, they can never clarify. They have to keep things ambiguous and scary, scares most away from looking into them, but makes some curious to learn more. Yeah, I think this is sort of the balancing act that they're constantly having to have, which is, we can't say what the allegations are, because that would mean that we would have to be honest, and we can't do that because most of the concerns and criticisms of the organization are legitimate. They're coming from victims of abuse from within the organization. They're coming from reporters who have done their due diligence. They're coming from documentarians. They're not fringe conspiracy theories. These are provable things. Often, in the case of what's happening in Norway, the organization being defunded because of their shunning policies. You can't refute that other than to say, that's a hard pitch to make to the R/F, the rank and file, to be like, well, they're defunding us because we shun people, and we proudly defend our right to shun people. That's hard to sell. So we'll see how he tries to balance himself on this tightrope here.
So that's why we need to make sure that we've got the belt of truth firmly around our waist, tight. But how can we tighten it? Well, of course, there are many different ways that we can reassure ourselves of the truth. But
reassure yourself of the truth. Sonny, you know me, I ramble on for, 10 straight minutes before getting into anything substantial. So you've barely missed anything, quite frankly. But yeah, reassure yourself of the truth. This is something to keep in mind. They have to remind people and reassure people, which is not something you usually have to do with facts. So yeah, there you go. And by the way, for people whose name shall remain anonymous, I have to talk over it. I can't just play it because then, Watchtower could take the video down. I have to comment on it, so it's fair use.
This morning, I thought we might talk about just one thing that may help us, and that is to go back to the basics. From time to time, to think about this question: what was it that convinced me or my family that this is the truth? And if we meditate on that, it can help to strengthen our resolve to continue in the truth. And in this way, figuratively speaking, it's as if we tighten the belt. And we all know, those of us that wear belts, you need a tight belt for it to be effective.
A tight belt. So what his thesis statement for this talk is going to be to, remind yourself of what made you fall in love with the organization in the first place, and going back to basics. And that language was really interesting to me because that was the exact language that I used for myself when I was really struggling with cognitive dissonance. When I was really fighting waking up, I was like, okay, what I need to do is go back to basics. You need spiritual milk again. You can't even have solid spiritual food. For me, this ended up having the opposite of the intended effect, which we can get to later. But a lot of what Jeffrey Jackson is going to suggest here I think is objectively terrible advice that could specifically lead someone to wake up, which to me proves how completely clueless and out of touch these guys are. So let's see what exactly he's on about.
Now, with that in mind, if ever you visit me in my office, you'll notice that I have two things that from time to time I'll look at. One is this publication. Now, when you look at it, you might say the same as my wife did a few days ago, don't you have a better copy of that edition? It's not really looking so good. So why is this in my collection of books in the office? Well, because this is the book, Let God Be True, that my mother started studying in 1956 when she was contacted in the door-to-door work. Now, I have a connection to this because at that time I was 18 months old. And as you can see in the front, I had no potential whatsoever of being in the writing department or the art department. But
he makes a little funny joke. He's got the jokes today. But yes, this is interesting. It's always interesting when they trot out the old publications as proof that they have the truth now. This book, Let God Be True, is a book that you cannot find on jw.org or the Watchtower online library. You would have to probably go to what Watchtower would consider to be an apostate source just to find a copy of that book. And not just to find a copy of that book, but to find the right edition of that book, because the copy that Jeffrey Jackson has is actually not the only edition of that book. So, like, let's see. Do I have this pulled up here? I'm going to direct folks to Larchwood's Twitter at Larchwood, LARCHWOOD. They're on Twitter, and they just have such a incredible archive of the most embarrassing Watchtower stuff. And they also have a really good section on avoidjw.org. So you can find some really good stuff there. And Larchwood posted something that showed some differences between the first edition of this publication and the edition that Jeffrey Jackson is showing. I have a hard time saying his name, Jeffrey Jackson. Let me pull this up here. So let's change the layout here. I'm not going to get into this too much because it kind of gets into the weeds, but these two editions of Let God Be True are very cringy and weird. He's holding this up as a piece of memorabilia, as almost like a museum piece. Look at this old book that helped my mom come into capital T, the truth, trademark sign. But there's a reason why you can't look up his mom's favorite book on Watchtower Online Library, because it's full of really cringy nonsense. Like, for example, Gathering the Jews, Past and Present. And it talks about, very specifically, in quite harsh language, the Jews need, modern day Jews. For example, in this first edition of the book, the facts and prophecies prove that the natural Jews will never again be chosen, regathered people. They have, as a people, flagrantly rejected the Messiah, his truth, and his kingdom. It is a false hope that they must be regathered to Palestine and be converted en masse to Jesus Christ prior to his second coming, and as a sign of the early establishment of his kingdom. God's kingdom was established in AD 1914. Blah, blah, blah. So it's really anti-Semitic. And the original one had even coarser language. So I actually don't want to read too much of this on YouTube, to be honest. I feel like already by reading that, it's going to be demonetized and flagged for anti-Semitism. These old publications are gross. They are full of really condemnatory language. They are really anti-Semitic, and notably, very few of the things taught in that book are still being taught today. So a witness watching this might be tempted to look up this book, and then they might wonder why they can't find it. And so they might Google search, and that might lead them to, JW Fact or something. So what are the chances if that of that happening? I don't know, but it's something that I think does not serve his purpose as well as he might think. So anyway, let's get back to this and what he considers to be an important book that reminds him of the love he had at first.
But I guess it did prove that at an early age I was interested in books. Anyway, this book is close to my heart because it helped my mother at a time when she faced some opposition. She just started using this book when a minister from the Methodist Church and a missionary came along to her house to try to force her to stop studying with Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, what did they do? Well, they berated the witnesses. They said all sorts of falsehoods, and they said everything they could that was negative about Jehovah's Witnesses.
Even here, he cannot name a single specific. He can't name a single thing that they were objecting to. But, notice this. When somebody is trying to prevent someone from studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, this is opposition. This is one of Satan's attacks. But when somebody is potentially trying to leave Jehovah's Witnesses, the witnesses will engage in these same exact tactics and try and do everything they can to spread negative information about whatever other religion the person's trying to convert to. So that is a bit rich, isn't it? The way they break out this persecution complex. And you would think, by the way, that maybe giving a historical example, he could find one thing that was said in opposition to his mother that he could use as a source of how crazy these apostates are. So, yeah, but he hasn't done that. And sorry, I'm not more engaged with chat. I want to make sure that this is more succinct and watchable as a video on the channel. So I don't have chat pulled up so that I don't get distracted. So we'll get to that maybe afterwards. But holy crap, we've broken a record. We have over 300 people watching live. I've never had that many people watching live. Pretty cool. And so let's all 300 of us brothers and sisters in Satan start to, I know it is rude. I always pay attention to Cam's comments, especially when they, call me rude. But anyway, here we go.
Once they left, my mother said that she felt very discouraged and disheartened after being the victim of this verbal abuse. So what?
Verbal abuse. Earnestly trying to warn somebody about a harmful religion is verbal abuse. By the way, I did see this comment by NorCal Rose Designs. This is on the website. This is on jw.org. It was just posted today, I believe. And yes, if you haven't, please like the video.
What did she do? She took her King James Bible and turned it to a scripture that she had just studied in paragraph 5 of this book in the first chapter. Maybe you'd like to read it with me if you would. If you have an electronic device, you have an advantage this morning because I'd like you to turn to the book of Isaiah chapter 8 and verse 20. But I'd like you to read.
Was that Isaiah 8:20? I want to look this up, actually. We gotta test them out sometimes. Make sure they're not spouting nonsense. Not that they would ever do that. I think he said Isaiah 8:20. I don't know.
Read it from the King James Version. So Isaiah chapter 8, verse 20. And if you tap on the verse 20, you'll see the King James Version may come up. It says, to the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Now that touched her heart and helped her.
Why? What does it mean? What is the context of this verse? What are they talking about? Good Lord. JW.org is so slow right now. It's insane. So yeah. Sorry about that. Man, I don't remember what I don't remember what the verse was. Can somebody in chat remind me? I'm a bad person. It is very breathy. Yeah, he's using the King James Version because at this time, the first edition of his book, I think, came out in 1946. And the New World Translation didn't come out until the 1950s, I think. So all of the references would have been from the King James Version. So there you go.
To make the decision to continue on studying. Now, if you're like me, you're probably trying to work out what is the testimony, what's this all about? But if you look at the revised text of the New World Translation in verse 20, it helps us, doesn't it? There it says, instead, they should inquire of the law and of the written confirmation. When they do not speak according to this word, they have no light.
Okay, I'm going to let him finish, actually. I'm going to let you finish. But Isaiah wrote the best book of all time. No, I'll let him finish, and then we'll refute what he is talking about.
So she realized that these two who had come to visit her did not show her anything from the scriptures, right?
This is bizarre. Okay, so let's look briefly, if you will, at the Bible, at God's word, the word of our Lord and Father Yahweh. I don't know. If we go to Isaiah 8, verse 20, so he just starts here. Instead of what? No word. They should inquire of the law and of the written confirmation or attestation. When they do not speak according to this word, they have no light. What word? What light? What are they talking about? So if you look, like, I don't know, I didn't look this up ahead of time, but I'm just glancing up a little bit. It says, if they say to you, inquire of the spirit mediums or of the fortune tellers who chirp and mutter, is it not of their God that a people should inquire? Should they inquire of the dead in behalf of the living? Instead of that, instead of going to spirit mediums and fortune tellers and people who inquire of the dead, they should inquire of the law. So what he's done is just completely take a verse, or I guess his mom did, not to throw out your mom jokes, but his mom did not apply scriptures properly. This doesn't make any sense. He just took a verse. It's like, they didn't come with the right according to this word, and this word means the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses. But that's not what the verse means. This is saying, don't listen to people who talk to dead people. And I'm assuming the people that came from the local church to talk to his mom were not directing her to consult with spirit mediums or fortune tellers. They probably were just using, and also, good point. What is the difference between picking a Bible verse or having tarot cards read? Not a whole lot. So, good point. Let us get back to the cringe.
They just said what they felt about Jehovah's Witnesses. So that helped her because she realized, as the Let God Be True book says in chapter 1, that everything we believe about God needs to be based on the Word of God, the Bible. In other words, written confirmation. So that's the first lesson, the first point that is a good reminder to me personally. No matter what people say
Oh, look at the humility. This is a good reminder to him personally. So no matter what people say about Jehovah's Witnesses,
about us, no matter what negative comments are made,
no matter what,
we can always take comfort in the thought that our beliefs are solidly based on the Bible.
So this is the favorite deflection of Jehovah's Witnesses, of the Watchtower leadership. It's not that they have harmful religious practices. It's based on the Bible. Now, if you've ever seen a movie that is based on a true story, that doesn't mean that it is 100% true. And much like Witnesses' beliefs are based on the Bible, does that mean that they literally follow what the Bible says? Well, of course not. There are things that they don't literally believe. The Bible does literally say to have women remain silent in the congregation. They don't do that because they've interpolated some kind of explanation that allows them to not have women remain silent, right? So, but another church could do exactly that. And they could say that their beliefs are based on the Bible. I got news for you. I was at Pride this past weekend, and there, of course, were religious types there with megaphones, seemingly taking a page out of the witness playbook. And they were dressed to the nines in a full suit, and they were very dapper, but they had, big sandwich board and a bullhorn saying, God hates gay people, you're going to die. And they had scriptures on that sandwich board of theirs. What they were screaming, the hateful things they were saying were based on the Bible. Because guess what? The Bible says some hateful things. You can say a lot of hateful things that are based on the Bible. Something being based on the Bible does not mean that it's good, healthy, or worth perpetuating. And it also doesn't mean that the witnesses believe it. Because many churches don't shun former members, and they base that on the Bible. They base their acceptance of former members on the Bible. So what he's saying here is a scapegoat. It's a get out of jail free card, because although they like to claim that the Bible never changes, their interpretation of it changes all the time. And also, Michael says Dante's Inferno is based on the Bible, which is absolutely true. Hey, speaking of based on things, based comment, Harrison has a really good video on that. Harrison Cawthor, The Truth Hurts, got a good breakdown of why the Bible actually preaches flat earth, and he's absolutely right. So, yeah, it is just a way for them to deflect any and all responsibility for their harmful practices. They can say, it's not us, we're just following what the Bible says. So what does that mean? Because obviously, one of the main things that they don't want people to know about are the horrific ways in which Jehovah's Witnesses mishandle child sex abuse cases. So what about other churches who they claim to be a part of Christendom who handle this issue better than witnesses? Why is it that despite not having Jehovah's backing, they do a better job at protecting children? Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Now,
just going to give a little heads up, by the way. If you're telling me to get back to the video and to stop talking, that's only going to make me want to talk more. So I unfortunately, that's going to have the opposite of the intended effect.
second thing that you may notice in my office is this Watchtower
If you just want to watch the video, you can go to jw.org.
It's from February 15, 1955. So if I'm not in my office and you see it, you may think, he's got that there because he was born just a couple of weeks after this. No, that's not the reason it's there. The reason is that this was the second thing that helped my mother to take a stand for the truth. There were two beautiful articles in this Watchtower. The first one was entitled, Only One Right Religion. And notice how it starts off. If you pay for wheat, Will you settle for straw? If you buy wine, will you accept water? Or if you thirst for water, will you be satisfied with mud? What if someone came to prove that you were being defrauded in these ways? Would you be angry with him or with the one who was cheating you? What a great start to the article. And then it went on to show how the truth of God's word is being taught by Jehovah's people today. But there's a second scripture.
So let's look at this Watchtower that he's talking about. And good point by Evelyn that he's reading from an old magazine and not the Bible. Now, interesting that he would cite an old 1955 Watchtower. Now, the difference between this and CLICKBAIT is that we actually can look at this on the Watchtower online library. So let's do exactly that. So this is the article that he's talking about. Oh, sorry, let me change my layout here. This is the article that he's talking about, but let's actually look at some of the other things. You might notice that the first article is wanted robot minds for today.
God did not create man with a robot mind, but the masses of people today often act as if they were mental robots. Why? Because of fear. In communist countries, there is fear of death. In the West, there is fear of communists and fear of losing prestige. Where there is fear, people seek the reassurance of conformity. The result is the machine mind. Non-conforming minds, if not regarded as security risks, are at least subjected to mounting popular disfavor.
Now, isn't this interesting? This is an article about not conforming to groupthink. I think that's what they're talking about. They're obviously stoking Cold War paranoia. This is from 1955, and they're fear-mongering about communism, which just goes to remind you, this is a deeply, intrinsically American religion. But where there is fear, people seek the reassurance of conformity. This is actually a very well-written and apt statement that completely accurately describes Jehovah's Witnesses. What is Jeffrey Jackson doing right this minute? He is talking about you need to be afraid of the bad things people are saying. Don't look at it. Don't even think about it. It's all lies. Just reassure yourself that you have the truth. He literally used that phrase at the beginning of his talk. And there is an article in this magazine that he is referencing that is making fun of that thing. And this is this is very weird. Just very weirdly written.
Many other men with keen minds have pointed out the danger that lies in the tyranny of robot minds.
What is he talking about? Present security. This is so strange. I really don't know what it's talking about. Could I perhaps get a slightly better understanding by reading it more thoroughly? Yes, but I don't have time to do that on stream. Said Dr. Einstein, if I would be a young man again and had to decide how to make my living, I would not try to become a scientist or a scholar or a teacher. I would rather choose to be a plumber or a peddler in the hope to find that modest degree of independence still available under present circumstances. Oh, that's still Watchtowers. They love that quote. We're not going to need scientists in the new system. We're going to need plumbers and divine plumbers. So the scientists are not alone in their plight. This is an age of fear. As Harold E. Talbot, Secretary of the Air Force, put it, which they would never do this nowadays. It would be, as one person said, as one authority figure said, we are living in an atmosphere of menace unprecedented in the history of mankind. And they cited the source, the New York Times, with only Times being italicized. That doesn't seem right. This unprecedented fear has spawned the age of conformity, the age of thought control, the age of robot minds. Robot mind is a very strange term. Man is now seized by such a mind-benumbing minds. You have to admit, though, women be shopping and minds be numbing. You know what I'm talking about here, guys?
Man is now seized by such mind-benumbing fear that he dares not even try to wake up the robot minds.
This is bananas. But first of all, what's so funny about this is like they are very specifically appealing to the fear of like US propaganda at the time, like the fear that you know, the West was spreading was that the communists want to control your minds, man. And this is what, you know, started all these crazy conspiracy theories of the time that kind of spawned the New World Order conspiracy theories about the government controlling your mind with radio waves and stuff. That's what the communists are going to do, man. They're going to take over and they're going to control your brain. But the fact that they would use this rhetoric is really interesting. And thought control is literally what Watchtower does. Cult experts, you know, credibly accuse them of this very thing. And they use fear. They want their members to have robot brains, to use the classic Watchtower term. So it's really quite bananas. Good comment. This falls under PG territory. Why plumbers? I always look forward to pooping in a hole in the woods. Yeah. Anyway, the point of this is what he is pointing to is like, look how our spiritual food still holds up. This is something that was precious to my mother when she came into the organization. And look, it all still totally holds up 100%. And going on the offensive. This is a really interesting one that, again, I think Larchwood tweeted some quotes about this, but I mean, this is exactly what Watchtower is, you know, kind of trying to do now. And yeah, only one right religion. This is the one that he's talking about in this article. And it's really, really interesting. They use the same arguments in a lot of ways, like modernist religions are even more flagrant in setting aside the Bible by their flair for the scientific, the psychological, the philosophical. While occasionally giving a token recognition and lip service to the Bible, they replace the wisdom of God with philosophy, the peace of God with psychology, the creation of God with evolution. Garbage. Pure garbage. The idea that there can be some literal objective interpretation of the Bible and that the governing body themselves are not bringing forward their own philosophies and biases in order to, you know, come up with their doctrine. So I always think it's valuable when Watchtower references these things. Like, look this stuff up, because if you're PMO and you're forced to watch these things, this is an in, right? This is an in with your parents who are making you watch the broadcast or whatever. If some, you know, person in the congregation sends you a text, they think that you're falling out of the organization. They're like, you need to watch this encouraging talk by Brother Jackson. Like, you know, like look up these references, because there is to a T always something really embarrassing whenever they reference this stuff. And this one you can find on the online library. Send them articles about robot brains and see if they're still talking about how amazing the spiritual food is.
Sure. That was in this magazine that really helped my mother. So if you'd like to turn with me to the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah chapter 23. Now, in the context of this, we're going to read verses 28 and 29. But in the previous verses, it mentions false prophets, those who tell lies, who are dreaming, and they try to explain their dreams. And in verse 27 says, these are the same ones who teach people or intend to make them forget my name. So what does verse 28 and 29 say? Let the prophet who has a dream relate his dream, but the one who has my word should speak my word truthfully.
Now, this is interesting. Let the one who has a dream relay his dream. Like, if you are claiming to be a prophet, relay what you're saying. And this is something that they don't do, the governing body. They do not reveal the mechanism by which they supposedly communicate with Jesus as the head of the congregation, right? They're always saying Jesus is the head of the congregation. He guides us. He directs us through the Holy Spirit. How does that work? None of your business. How do you know you're anointed? Don't worry about it. Don't ask. It's rude to ask. Even other anointed people shouldn't be asking their fellow anointed people how they know. So he is reading something that he is very deliberately not applying to himself. And great comment by Samantha. Wow, I wonder who has made a prophecy that hasn't come true. Yeah, false prophets. Who has described themselves as modern day prophets and also have prophesied a thing that haven't come true? That would be Jehovah's Witnesses. So we just know. And therefore, you should just trust us that we just know. So you just know that we just know. And we all can just honor system on this stuff, right? Ridiculous. Yes. Robot brain is kind of incredible. I think that we need to make this a thing. Sorry. Now I am getting caught up in the comments. His smirk at the ARC said what he thinks of us. Yeah, exactly. So, sorry about that. Let's get back into it. We're actually towards the end of this, though.
What does the straw have in
Sophie R,
common
thanks
with
for
the
joining.
grain, declares Jehovah. You see how the Watchtower article was tied in there about grain and straw? But the point being that we need to speak God's word truthfully. Now, the second article in this magazine, which is equally good, helps.
The implication, of course, being that, oh, okay, well, if somebody else starts arguing with you from the standpoint of the Bible, they're not doing it truthfully. You are. We're the only organization that can possibly reason from the scriptures truthfully. Yeah. A lot of comments about how massive his book is. And I really didn't notice it until chat pointed it out, but it's true. This thing is kind of humongous.
Persons to see the need to select the true religion.
And sorry I keep pausing, but you know what, Tammy? Great point. Because it is insulting for the governing body to think that everyone in their community is so ignorant. And they're giving this talk because they know that their community is not. That they know that all of this increased visibility of the dangerous aspect of this organization, it's getting out there. Witnesses are hearing it. It is inescapable. They're just too behind on the internet ball to possibly combat this stuff. And so this is damage control. They are desperate.
It says, choosing the one right religion. In this article, it raises the point that sometimes people will say, well, I just don't have time to investigate all the religions in the world. How can I find the truth?
This is a fascinating point that he brings
It's just
up here.
like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Well, this magazine, building on what was said in Jeremiah, said, well, if you go to a haystack looking for a needle, you don't have to look at every straw in the haystack. Actually, they recommend quite a radical move. Burn the haystack, and then with a magnet, you can find the needle. Now, what's the point? Well, as it goes on to say, you see, as Jeremiah said, God's word is like a fire. You see, in verse 29, it says a fire that consumes the rubbish. So we don't have to go around investigating all the various teachings of different religions. That would be like a huge haystack.
Yeah, the needle doesn't exist. That's the problem. So here, Jeffrey Jackson has just said, you don't need to go investigate all these other religions. You don't start doing that. You don't need to do that. Once you're pretty sure you found the truth, he gets into more details. But this is the key point that he's making. How do we evaluate all the religions to know that ours is true? You don't. You don't look at all these religions. The source is, trust me, bro.
But rather, when we study the Bible and we see the pure truth in the scriptures, then we can identify anything that's virtually rubbish or straw, and we have the real thing.
So what about somebody who argues that the Bible is not the true holy book? You know, there are religions that don't base themselves on the Bible. right? Like, what if somebody's like, yeah, I don't know about this Bible. A lot of violence and murder and genocide and stuff in here, and things that we can't say on YouTube in this Bible. Maybe another holy book. So, like, his thing of like, you don't need to look. You're gonna recognize the Bible truth, and then you anything that doesn't line up with what we're teaching, it's fake. We already taught you the truth, so why are you going out and trying to? It's yeah, Sasha. OMG, he dares to say we can identify the rubbish. Yeah. Yeah, what about stuff that predates the Bible? Yeah. Because make no mistake, he's not saying to just read the Bible and trust in that. He's saying, it's the truth. You already learned the truth. So just think about the stuff that was convincing to you back in the day. Go back and think about the book that you studied. Go back and think about your favorite Watchtower. Feels over reels. It's true. So just if you examine everything through the lens of whether or not it aligns with what we teach, well, we're the only true religion. Isn't that amazing? So, yeah.
Yes, that helps to really convince us that we have the truth. Because if people don't even know Jehovah's name, why would we believe them? And if they believe that people are going to hellfire, why would we believe everything?
If people don't even know Jehovah's name, why would we believe them? This is such an insane straw man argument that I don't even know where to begin. And we're basically at the end of this video. Yeah, first of all, it's not a real name. It's not how scholars think his name is actually pronounced. And people do know that. People who are making allegations against Jehovah's Witnesses aren't like, well, I don't know what Jehovah is, but JW bad. People like the Telegraph knows why they're called Jehovah's Witnesses. Like this new podcast series that's coming out. They did their research. The main accusers, the main issue for Watchtower are former members of their own religion, particularly members of abuse, not members, victims of abuse, survivors of gross abuse that happened in this organization. They don't want people to look at what we're saying because we know what we're talking about. We do know that God's name is Jehovah. We know the doctrines inside and out. So we can break this stuff down. The reason why they don't want people to watch this is because it's objectively, obviously, and provably untrue. The things that they're saying are very thin. Their reasoning is very weak. And if they had stronger reasoning, they would say it. If they had a slam dunk argument, which, by the way, hi, Bo, licking his little butt on camera. That's great. So yeah, it's really bizarre. And it's bizarre to assert that somebody who doesn't know God's name could not bring a credible allegation against this religion. Like, okay, well, they're covering up CSA cases, but do they even know God's name? Do they even know Psalm 83:18? It's like, what does that have to do with anything? Just because, and this is like the almost like, what's the word? Like the just pure infatuation they have with this name is absolutely bananas. And it makes it so that people, that witnesses, when they hear anything that doesn't even have the name Jehovah in it, it's like their safe word in the absence of it is also a get out of jail free card. There's such a obsession with the literal name that it's like a weird deflection of everything. Like they have convinced everybody that this name, literally the name, and staying the name and spreading the name is so important that you can discount any credible allegation of abuse just because of the name. It's branding. Yeah, it's their lucky charm word. And I'm glad to hear you say that, Sandra. It is very clear that they're scared. Thought terminating cliches. Absolutely. And this is a really good point by Uncle Salty 777. People don't know Jehovah's name. Jeffrey Jackson doesn't either. The June 15th, 2015 broadcast, he admits that Jehovah is not God's name. They only use it because it is widely known in English. This is true. That broadcast, if I'm remembering it correctly, is them going through all the different languages of the Bible. And like, hey, in Spanish, we say Jehovah. And in this language, we say this. It's not the literalness of how it's pronounced, because the multilingual nature of the organization presents a problem. Like, it's not literally the name Jehovah, because that's not how it's pronounced in most other languages of the world, right? And that's a problem for them, because Jehovah is not an accurate translation of the Tetragrammaton either. So they fall back on this name thing whenever they can, but they don't even believe it. And this is one of the things that is really important to do, I think, is like, do they even believe this thing that they're teaching? By which I mean, like, do they enforce this consistently? And almost always the answer is no. Let's watch the last little bit of this.
They say, particularly if they're criticizing Jehovah's people. So what about you?
By the way, it's not criticizing Jehovah's people. This is another really big straw man argument. And I'm pausing so much because every sentence he has said is manipulative. It takes 5 seconds to tell a lie, and it can take an hour to unravel the lie that was said, right? So people like myself who make videos on YouTube, I don't make videos making fun of Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't make fun of like my mom and dad, my grandparents, the wonderful, sweet, elderly families, elderly, like people that I knew, like the sweet, like rank and file witnesses. Nobody is sincerely criticizing them. What we're criticizing is him. It's the leadership. And you know what Jeffrey Jackson really doesn't want the members to see is him lying in front of the Australian Royal Commission, him flop sweating and floundering. But the way he does this is he's like, they're attacking you. They're saying bad things about us, about our community, but it's not bad stuff about little old sister so-and-so. They're saying these policies are harmful. The leaders know they're harmful, and they're too scared to do anything about it. PG stream. So look out for this rhetoric. This is what they do. And be insistent about this, because this is what your believing family members and friends are going to throw at you if you're trying to exit the religion and you're trying to give your reason to them. They're going to say things like, how could you possibly turn your back on Jehovah's people? The lies that they're spreading about Jehovah's people. And it's not that. It is not criticisms of the rank and file. And those that are, like maybe the culture of the religion, the gossip culture and the judgmentalism and all these things, all of that is all an extension of how people are mandated to act because of the policies of the governing body. So the only criticism of the people comes from attitudes that they are forced to have from the leadership. It's all trickle down, right? So this is a big deflection.
That they convinced you that you found the truth. Well, it's good from time to time to think about that question. In my case, I think of those things that my mother taught me. The first one from the book of Isaiah, to make sure that what we believe is based on the Bible. And then the second thing, we don't have to investigate every story that's told to us. Once we have the truth from the Bible, we can recognize what's right and what's wrong. Yes, we don't need to listen to the father of the lie, but we certainly believe in the God of truth.
Yeah. He ends with some pretty triggering stuff there. It's pretty hard to listen to be honest. Once we know the truth, we don't have to listen to every story we hear because we can stack it up against the Bible and know whether or not it's true. How's that supposed to work exactly? Like, Watchtower is going to court for real. They're literally doing it. They go there. They publish opinions like in the local papers in Norway, for example, defending their stance of shunning and arguing in favor of why they should not be defunded by the Norwegian government. So where's the lie, though, to quote that classic thing? Like, when it comes to allegations that the organization is covering up CSA cases, how is a witness supposed to combat that allegation with the Bible? Because this isn't a refute against the Bible or whoever the person is you're talking to. It's an allegation against the leadership. And Jeffrey Jackson is specifically saying, don't investigate this. You don't need to do this. These things are coming from Satan, the father of the lie. And what's so clever is they never connect these dots specifically, right? He doesn't say any allegation you hear about us is from Satan. What he says is we don't need to investigate every story because we can stack it up against the Bible. Pause. Why would we listen to the father of the lie? You know, this gives them plausible deniability because it would be pretty damning if they said this sort of thing in a video, and then because they could trot that out in a court proceeding, right? The prosecution could be like, hey, by the way, members of the jury, they think that everything that we're accusing is a lie from Satan. You know, that would be embarrassing. So they have to be very careful in their rhetoric. And, you know, I found this very triggering, and I hate to tell you this, but that's the end of the video, so it's just going to be me talking for the rest of the time. But I think there's still a lot to talk about, even though we finished watching the video. And I want to get into a particularly disturbing Watchtower that's coming up soon that has even harsher language than this and is much more explicit. Just as a little teaser. But he said, what I think about is what my mother taught me. And, oh, brother, is that triggering for me. By the way, great comment here by Jenny, who always has great comments and has a great blog, too. We are not robots. Now let us reprogram our minds. Yes, because you have to remind yourself. You know what's weird is I never have to remind myself that the earth is round. I don't have to be like, oh, I hear all these allegations about the earth being flat. I don't want to be discouraged by that. So I better remind myself. I better watch some footage from the moon landing. I mean, what? You don't have to remind yourself of things that are clearly and obviously true. That's not true. You do. Like, sometimes you have to remind yourself of certain things, but you know what I'm saying, right? But the thing about remember what your parents taught you. I'm thinking about what my mother taught me. This is the line that my parents gave me. Like, we raised you with this. How are you going to turn your back on the things that we raised you in? Parents have never taught their children something wrong. No parent has ever been wrong about anything. You have to agree with what your parents taught you forever. Everybody knows this. You know, not my grandparents that went against their parents who were Catholics. You know, that it was okay that they turned their back on their religious upbringing because, you know, they found the truth. So this is very manipulative. This is a line that witnesses will use to try and keep their family members from leaving. You know, we didn't raise you to do this kind of thing. Think about how you felt about this as a kid. And the other thing that he goes back to is remember the things that convinced you that this religion was true in the first place. Now, let's think like for me? Like, what was that for you? Like, if you're somebody here, I'm imagining that you're not currently a believer, or maybe you're questioning a little bit, right? For me, the things that made it like that convinced me that it was the truth was that it was like the kindest, healthiest, and most correct religion doctrinally. Like, we had the most accurate understanding of the Bible. And the more I thought about shunning, the more I thought about our stance on LGBTQ issues, I was like, this isn't kind. This is actually really harmful. This has detrimental effects on people's lives. This isn't kind. And then I thought about, is it the healthiest religion? Well, no, it's not healthy. Shunning is very unhealthy. It can lead to suicide. And the mere fact of me questioning is so detrimental to my mental, emotional, and physical health. Most correct. We're changing our doctrines all the time. We don't believe the same things that we did when I was coming up. We don't have the same baptism questions. My dedication is arguably invalid. I said a different dedication, right? So does Jeffrey Jackson actually want people to go back and examine the things that made them fall in love with it? Because it might have the opposite of the intended effect. It might cause people to think, wait a minute, is this so loving? A lot of people, when they first join, they fall in love with the illusion of transparency, to the point where one of the things that David Splain says in his anti-apostasy talk is, if people come out with these allegations, take them to the meetings, show them how our finances work. By which they mean, we keep our financial reports on the bulletin board of the Kingdom Hall. See, nothing shady going on here. We keep all of our records on the board. We know exactly where our leaders live. They live in Warwick. They don't live in luxury. They don't have sports cars and yachts and mansions and private planes like these other televangelists. Did I say other televangelists? I meant just televangelists. Our guys aren't televangelists. Yes, they do preach on television and often ask for money. But, if you were in love with the transparency, this is very explicitly an anti-transparency talk. It is saying, don't test out what they're saying to see whether or not it's true. Don't be like the Bereans who analyzed every word. Don't do that. So this is a blatantly, here's what I think. For most witnesses, it's about the repetition. It's about the ritual. It's about hearing what you have been conditioned to think are like comforting voices. You're not really letting any of this sink in. It's all just echo chamber. It's noise. It's comforting because it's familiar. But when you get to a point where you're no longer connecting with it in the way that you did, and you start wondering why that is, you start noticing things like this. And so this kind of talk, I think, can be detrimental for them. Might it scare some people? A little bit, maybe. But it also might get people to start thinking, what is all of this stuff that he doesn't want us to look at exactly? I see somebody asking for a link to the Patreon. If someone in chat wants to provide him with that, you can also look in the description of previous videos. I always post a link to it. So before we close out, this rhetoric is only going to get more intense. There's a lot coming down the pike. There's a lot simmering. They've gotten pretty lucky in the fact that with all of this increased interest in cults and documentaries about cults and podcast series about cults, let's not forget, before all these NXIVM documentaries that aired on HBO, there was that podcast series, right? Podcast series are a big deal. These journalistic podcast series, Dr. Death, like when Wondery or Serial or NPR does a podcast investigative series, they're massive. They made like a mini series with like Alec Baldwin based off of Dr. Death. There's a couple Netflix shows that are based off of true crime podcast series. So if this thing hits, If this Call Bethel series hits, this could really be pretty detrimental. I need to acknowledge, by the way, I got a super chat that I totally forgot to shout out, which is by, oh boy, is it Jasia Torres? Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm sure I butchered it, but thank you so much for the $5 super sticker. And thank you too. Song 113 No More. Great name, $9.99. Doubling up to make it a full 144,000 instant dollars as well. And see, we always like to remind people of the 144,000 challenge. Nobody yet has dared donate $144,000. What study article was I talking about? Okay, well, I'm going to put this on screen so I don't forget to pull it up. Yeah, okay. So let's pull up the study article. It's a fairly recent one. Somebody tipped it. It was a YouTube comment that I happened to see today, and one of the few times I was glad that I read the comments because somebody was like, "You need to read this study article." There's a lot of crazy stuff in it, and I was like, "Oh, good shout. This actually is kind of nuts." And I'm showing this because it feels of a piece with this video that we just watched in terms of, is Watchtower, are they going to soften in their rhetoric? I think no, I think not so much. They're going to double and triple down and become more and more insular. That's my take, until they're absolutely forced, probably by new, younger, more progressive leadership to do something about it. I don't think these old guys are going to be doing anything. The article in question, let me go ahead and share this, is Revelation, what it means for your future. And oh boy, whenever they whip out Revelation, it's going to be some serious shiz. PG. Boy, I was hoping for an image of destruction, but no. This is chill, right? This is what you want. Don't we all long for Armageddon when you're just looking at that great cube in the sky that houses God's king? Like, what are we looking at here? Anyway, listen to how this is one of the cultiest articles, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing because on Sundays I do like a kind of like a Watchtower and chill stream. So this will not be this week, but when we get to it, we'll have a full on debunking fest. But this is what's coming down the pike. This is the May 2022 study article. So they should be studying this pretty soon. Paragraph 1. People today have an important decision to make. Will they support Jehovah God as the rightful ruler of the universe, or will they stand behind his vicious enemy, Satan the devil? There is no middle ground. Whatever decision they make will affect their everlasting future. During the Great Tribulation, they will be marked either for survival or for destruction. Intense, and yet, dear reader, would you believe it goes on? If you have chosen to support Jehovah's rulership, you have made a wise decision. I need to be like the the guy from not Temple of Doom, but Last Crusade. You chose poorly. You chose wisely. If you have chosen to support Jehovah's rulership, you have made a wise decision. Now you are eager to help others to make the right choice. To that end, you can use the information in the book of Revelation to help them. So anyway, very clear language, black and white. There is no middle ground. You will only support Jehovah or Satan. And based on that, you will be marked for survival or destruction. So this is the kind of fun rhetoric. What lies ahead for those who oppose God? Now, keep this in mind. A lot of people leave the organization and don't oppose God. I don't know if you noticed this. There's plenty of Christian-centric XJW channels even. And by the way, I want to have more collaboration with them, because I feel like there's kind of like a weird unspoken like line that's not crossed between like, I don't know, slightly more secular XJW content, more Christian-y. Anyway, that's not important. What is important is Capitan with an important reminder. For some reason, the phrase "an important reminder" stands out to me because that talk that Algin gave. Capitan 1999, smash that like button, please. As far as I'm concerned, we should have 323 likes because that's how many concurrent viewers we have right now. And hey, no voice classes. I've just always done silly voices from the time I was just a wee lad. Ask my wife. I annoy her constantly by randomly jumping into crazy voices all the time. But to my credit, she also does. And our marriage could not function if either one of us were annoyed by silly voices. I do want to look at this, by the way. People who are not serving Jehovah will seek protection from the political and commercial systems of this world, which are compared to mountains. Since those will not take a stand in favor of God's kingdom, Jehovah will consider them to be opposers. Their firm stand will provoke the rage of those who oppose Jehovah. As a result, a coalition of nations will attack God's people all over the earth. This act of mad aggression is described prophetically as the attack of Gog and Magog. Completely unhinged, his great rage will flare up. I mean, this is just like, what is the difference between this and doomsday like Sunday sermon televangelist? It's the same rhetoric. What's the difference between this and the megaphone people at the Pride Parade this past weekend? There is no difference. It's the same thing. And hey, some support for reaching across the aisle. I've reached out to, I'm buddies with buddies might be a strong word, but he's to shout out somebody who I really am just like literally realizing in this moment, and this is the wrap up, by the way. So Kill All Humans sounds like a robot to me. Oh, very good. Mark Martin has an XJW channel that is excellent. It is aimed really at like looking at the New World Translation and like whether or not witnesses are right from a scriptural standpoint. And I think that stuff is super valuable because that can be a really scary thing for some who are like, whoa. Well, you know, questioning the leadership of men is one thing, but questioning the Bible, you know, I know I, for myself, wanted to know if there was a more accurate, I don't know, version of the Bible. But Mark Martin was so freaking nice, man. Because I had that surgery, right? I had my entire colon removed. I now have an ostomy bag. And Mark, I think it was John Maple that put me in contact with him because he was like, hey, you know, he went through something really similar. Mark called me a couple times, man. He gave me like really practical advice because he had the same thing. Now, his surgery was able to be reversed. But he just like had such like nice practical advice for like coping with the recovery of the surgery. And like we were able to talk about like gross medical stuff that I wasn't able to talk about. So anyway, just to shout out, I've never shouted him out before, but he's a really nice guy, really nice dude. So if you're a Bible-y person, check out his channel. I haven't checked in a while. I need to ask my boy. And he's a busy guy. I haven't been able to have him on the stream yet. But anyway, this has been really fun. But coming up this week, so we talked about this podcast, right? That's going to be happening. Call Bethel. And one of like the most awesome and just one of the best XJW activists and voices out there, Jill Owens, who's like Mighty Mouse on Twitter. She tweeted out today that she was the one who kind of put the newspaper onto this story because she was trying to raise awareness of the CSA issues around the time when ICSA was happening. And it turned into something. And so she's a part of this, like, really amazingly well produced, hard hitting piece about CSA cases. So on Wednesday of this week at 4 o'clock, Jill's going to come on stream and we're going to talk about this upcoming podcast series. We're going to talk about the Telegraph article, and I think we're going to talk about activism. What can we do to like spread more awareness of stuff like this? I've tried to do that, like tried to like reach out to local reporters and stuff, and I don't know how to do that. I've gotten like some traction and then like kind of falls off, you know? So I think it'll be a really cool conversation. We'll talk about this stuff and we'll talk about, you know, things that we can all do to like raise awareness. So thank you. We had like so many people tune in. It's kind of overwhelming and freaky. And I apologize. Normally the streams are just more of a vibe. They're more chill, hanging out. Hey, Bree, thank you so much. The silly voice appreciation is needed because I feel like I'm constantly being very irritating, and everyone is just putting up with me out of politeness. So thank you so much for the chat, the super chat, not just the chat, the super chat. But yes, this coming Wednesday, we'll have Jill on the channel. It'll be super fun, good conversation. And so, yeah, like and subscribe. Please comment on the actual video if you get a chance. And ooh, cool. Jenny, thanks to My Little Pimo. She was able to chat with a reporter. Yeah, My Little Pimo, by the way, doing really great stuff behind the scenes as well. Chris wants to become a patron. Awesome. I will make sure I post a link in the description ASAP. If you go to patreon.com and search All Worldly, I think I'm the only one that comes up. So it should show up in that way. But I'll post a link. And of course, we're all here for Bo, who I gotta say, I think must be in another room for once in his freaking life, not torturing me. And boy, I think I made it without cursing. I did say damning at one point, but that is a biblical word. And it is not a curse word in the context in which I used it. And, you know, to close things out,
We'll try to... How will Jehovah react to this vicious attack? He tells us my great rage will flare up. Revelation chapter 19 describes what happens next. Jehovah sends forth his son to defend his people and to defeat their enemies.
I think, by the way, I was really realizing lately, like, why do we do that voice? And it's because, like, I grew up like watching Looney Tunes, of course, which like they all had that old timey news footage and stuff. And then The Incredibles was like my favorite movie, and that opens with the like,
where are they now? They are now average citizens, average heroes walking among us.
Like I just was always drawn to that old timey news footage stuff. Anyway, folks, thank you. Like and subscribe. Patreon gets you access to the Discord, which is super fun. And we have an IRL activism channel there where we're constantly trying to work out ideas to do more like on the street stuff. So thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that. Cool. And I'm not going to play my intro or outro because YouTube copyright strikes it about 40% of the time. So I'm not even going to risk it. But I am trying to do a thing where I have a sign off, and I might have people write in sign off suggestions. So today, as I always say, we say this every week. Always remember, please give this to your car care professional.